So, hi, I am this is going to be a secretary desk that possibly I will keep from myself, which is rare. So I have already prepped this table, and as you can see, it's already been painted as well. I sanded, not sanded it down to bare wood or anything like that because it has a veneer, so you don't want to sand too much on furniture that has a veneer. Underneath is usually like pressed wood or what do they call it? My mind is blanking right now, but like cheaper wood basically. So not solid wood underneath. The veneer hides that. So when you're sanding, don't go too far, and just roughly scuff sand the surface so that it's no longer slick. The surface felt kind of like laminate. It was extremely glossy and slick, so I knew if I tried to just paint over that, it's going to peel. So you need to scuff sand surfaces like that. You can use stuff that, you know, adheres to slick surfaces too, but honestly I would not recommend doing that. It's much more durable if you just do the work and just scuff sand it. If you're just using a product on top of something glossy, the paint will adhere, but it will more likely scratch off and scrape. So what's underneath is very important. So you can, you know, use products and a primer to make it adhere, but it's just better to sand in those instances. So I also primed it. My favorite way to prime, I don't have a sprayer, so and even if I did have a sprayer, I don't know if I'd want to spray primer and then have to clean that. So I use Rust-Oleum's Painter's Touch. It's the Ultra Cover. It's in a matte white. So I just spray it so that it kind of covers most of the surface. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this helps adhesion as well, but most importantly, it helps me with having to do less layers of paint. I am using their milk paint, so the milk paint is not as it's not as opaque as a chalk-based paint, their chalk paint. It's slightly it's thinner in consistency. So this is the milk paint. It's my favorite, the Highland Blue, and it's thinner, but the bonus of that is that if you want it to show a bit of the color underneath, then this would be perfect. But what I look for is the brush strokes, and the milk paint gives you a super smooth surface, self-levels, as long as you don't put too much paint on your brush at one time and put it on, it levels and it looks like the surface has been sprayed, but it hasn't. I used my brush and hand painted all of this. So this has all been hand painted. I used 2 layers, I think, of the paint and got this coverage, but I'm not done yet. This is all just the prep for using a metallic paint. So metallic paints are more work, and they do require a bit more of technique, but they're worth it. I love the colors and the finish you get with the metallic paint. It's has a lot of depth, and then it looks slightly different under certain lighting. So it's kind of, you get that color play. I'm painting it with the teal. This is Modern Masters teal. It's kind of like a blue with a silver undertone. This is going to be my first paint color layer. I'm going for a slightly old world look, aged look, so I'll be adding a bit of brass and some other colors on top to bring out some of the corners here and the shape of the drawers. So give it kind of like a patina look, but metallic. So that's my plan for that. And then I'll be adding the transfer, the Elegance and Flowers transfer over it. And I like to paint the base of the furniture piece that I'm doing a similar shade of color, because it will help you with having to not do as many layers of the metallic paint. So I know it looks like I've already done a lot of layers, but honestly, if I had just gone ahead and just tried to paint the teal over the surface, it would have taken me 10 layers maybe. I'm not exaggerating. It will take a lot because under the light, when you look at it, you can see some of the brush strokes if you don't get a full coverage of the paint. So it'll look streaky when you turn it around and then when you look at it in certain lighting. So with metallic paint, it's tricky that you need to make sure you have it under very, very good lighting. Just like sunlight is the best, and like natural lighting is the best to see it, and make sure you go and look at it from different angles so that you know you have full coverage. It can look like it has full coverage just from looking at it from the front, but believe me, that is not the case. I have to go back and touch up the areas all the time until I'm certain that the surface is completely covered with the metallic paint. And the reason is that the paint is thinner. It's not like chalk paint, it's not like the mineral based paints. So it's kind of like acrylic base. So you need more layers of the metallic paint. And also when I'm painting, I don't like to do too thick of layers with metallics, because I don't want the brush strokes to be too apparent. I don't mind like slight brush strokes here and there because, you know, I'm hand painting something, so I can get it with absolutely no brush strokes, but that would require buffing and sanding in between layers to get it completely smooth, which you can do if that's your aim. But I think with hand painted pieces, you know, you're going to have slight brush strokes here and there. It's not a factory finish, so that's just the way it goes. I'm using my Klingon brush. I like Klingons. I like a lot of other brushes too, as well. There's a lot of great companies out there now. You know, the price range can be from $8 to $30, $40 even for a paintbrush. I think it's a good investment to have a good paintbrush because, you know, it's a tool that you use, and it's one of your most important tools. So you want to make sure it's a good quality brush and it's not going to leave bristles over the surface as you paint, and it's going to last for a long time. So you're not replacing it with a bunch of brushes every month. So you can see the coverage for this looks really good, and that is because I painted the base layer with a similar color. I'm going to do a blog comparison to show you how it looks when you just try to paint the metallic directly onto the surface without priming or doing a base coat of anything. So this is the teal, and I'm just doing thin layers. I have my spray bottle too. You want to keep the brush damp when you are working with metallics. As it dries up and picks up more paint, when you dip the brush into the paint, it will cause it to kind of gunk up and not look smooth. So the appeal of metallic paint is that smooth finish. So you want it to look smooth and not rough. I always go in one direction with my brush. And then I will spray my brush to dampen it. Do not spray the metallic paint because it will cause it to have droplets onto the surface because the paint is thin. So just spray your brush to keep it nice and damp, or you can just dip a little bit back into water as well if that's easier for you to do. The paint dries fairly quickly if you use nice thin layers. So you won't have to wait for the layers to dry longer if you just use thin layers. And it does end up saving you quite a bit of time. So it looks smooth because I used the milk paint as well, which gave me a smooth surface to start. The metallic paints, if there's any sort of texture on the surface, it will show. It's not like chalk paint, you can't just cover it up. So it's more finicky, but the results are amazing, so I think it's worth all the time and effort put into it. So I'm going to probably do 3 layers of the paint just to make sure it looks fully covered and painted and there are no streaks. And I like using my shorty brush with the short handle because it's easier on my wrists. I like the regular brushes too. I have them and I use them often, daily, but sometimes it's nice to take a break and use the shorter brush, especially when you're going to be doing a large surface area. Less taxing on your wrists. So that's why I like the shorty for it. Right. You can get these wheelie things at Freight Harbor or online. I bought these off on Amazon and they are extremely useful, not only for lifting the furniture piece to elevate it, but also just ease of moving it around too. So I go in one direction only, makes it smoother, and this kind of applies to any paint out there. If you do it in one direction, it will generally look smoother. Just like when you stain with the direction of the wood grain, it looks smoother, and when you apply your paint in one direction, it looks smoother. I'm just keeping my brush nice and damp. Thin layers. Do like, try to sweep it from one edge to the other if you can. And so even though I'm going in this direction with this, I'm going to try to get the edges to the direction that I'm going anyways. So you just got to kind of work quick. Don't overwork the paint because it will start to drag across the surface, and then you're going to have little clumps that aren't attractive at all, which you'll have to sand down to get the surface back nice and even. So just, you know, try not to go back and forth too much. And even if it doesn't look fully covered yet, just leave it and let the paint dry. So like, I'm not going to go back and touch that area because it's already been a minute and it's hardening. So if I try to add more paint and drag it over there, the paint will come off and it won't look good. So when you're using metallics, use thin layers and let the layers dry in between. That's extremely important. Even if you're blending, you have to let the layers dry in between before adding another layer. So with any sort of thinner based paint, that would generally apply as well. Like with enamel paints I've used, they tend to be thinner, so you want to do light layers and then let them dry. And I know it's, you know, I'm not a very patient person either when it comes to paint drying. I want to just keep working while I'm in the zone, and it's hard to just stop, but sometimes you just have to let things take their course of time in order to get the perfect results. So you can't rush some things. Patience when it comes to the metallic paints is extremely important. And you want to have a light hand when you're using them too. So all right. So while I was doing the top, this has dried already. So I'm going to go ahead and add the second layer. So actually that wasn't too long. If I had applied this a lot more thicker, I would still be waiting. So as far as saving you time, doing it in thin layers actually is less time spent drying overall. So I'm just like dabbing my brush too. I'm not even, don't dab it all in there. I only dab the very tip so that I'm not wasting the paint and I'm also not over applying it. Because really, you know, I'm trying to be gentle with this, so I'm just sweeping it across the surface lightly. And that's what gives it a nice even finish, and also saves you from wasting paint as well. So just be delicate with the metallic. And don't overwork it. Side. I'm just going to switch sides. Just easier. One direction. And I can tell when my brush is getting kind of dry because it's not sweeping the paint over as much and giving me less coverage, so that just means it's drying. You want to use a synthetic brush with any acrylic based paint. Chalk paint brushes, which are the ones with the all natural bristles, are good for chalk paint. Or chalk based paint, any sort of thicker paint where you want texture, but for metallics you don't want too much texture, so definitely use a synthetic bristle brush. Just making sure I get it even. I know probably from your perspective it looks like it's all completely even, but from mine I can see where it's still kind of streaky and the surface doesn't look completely covered evenly with the teal. And that's just the trick that metallic paints play on you, because they are a light reflective paint, so it can be deceiving. Modern Masters does have a paint extender that allows you to work with the paint for longer, keeps it wet longer. And you can use that, you mix it with the metallic paint, and it'll give you more working time with it. If you're, if you're just beginning and you're afraid of messing up, or if you want to do blending and want to have that ability to try to blend it longer on the surface. But even if you're blending, you need an even, nice and even metallic base. Like, I'm adding the brass, but I'm going to make sure this is completely even, so there are no streaks and it looks finished. Usually the edges and the little in the corners and the raised areas where the paint doesn't go on evenly straight away. So I'm just making sure I get those covered, especially since I'm using a wider brush. It doesn't get into the smaller areas as easily. So just gotta make sure that all good. Okay, so I'm going to go do the top now. I like to do it in sections. Usually it goes like bottom to top or middle to bottom to top. I just like working in small in sections so that I also allow the paint to dry enough as I'm doing one section. So I just love the finish of metallic paints. They're amazing. And I like shiny things, so it's perfect for me. Plus it's like, I think it's a bit glam, you know, like having a metallic surface makes it look a bit more glamorous. Kind of like a luxury finish. It's just fancy. Fancy paint. There's a lot of metallic brands out there now. I know a lot of furniture paint companies are coming out with their own lines of metallics, and they are really good too. I usually choose my metallics based on color. I don't really, you know, I'm not like a brand fanatic whatsoever. I do represent paint brands, but I always encourage people to try as many brands out there as possible, because what is my favorite may not be your favorite. So what I like may not necessarily be what works best for you or what you like, because we're all different people and unique, so we all have our different preferences. There's no perfect paint out there. There's not the best paint out there. There's no such thing as a perfect paint. I could never use one paint forever. I just could not, you know. And that's why I represent different brands, because I look for the unique characteristics of their paints, and I use that when it's suitable for me. So just having a large variety allows me to do a lot of different styles, and I love doing that. So it's like, plus it also varies on cost as well. I know that, you know, not everyone can afford fancy paint, especially if maybe you're just starting out, you know, and you don't want to mess up and you need to practice with something. Using the Waverly paint at Walmart is probably, you know, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with using a paint brand you can find at Walmart or Michael's or Home Depot, Lowe's. They are all great paints in their own way. So that it's starting to look, it looks pretty even to me right now so far. And I think the paint color is the one thing that can't be replicated, because each company has their own, you know, special formula for the color. So even if it looks like it's the same shade, it doesn't look the same. So that's why I say I pick based on color, because that's what matters to me, is how it looks. So if I want like a type of black paint, then it may be from one brand, or there's another one that I want the specific shade that I want from another brand. So just keep your options open. Okay, it looks really good. I think I can go ahead and do the brass safely. I'm just touching up the areas. The coverage is the way I want it, so I'm just spot checking. Don't ever do the metallics in a poorly lit room. It will surprise you when you put it in a different room where there's more lighting, and then you're like, it doesn't look that way when I saw it before. Okay, right, yeah, that looks pretty good. Just gonna make sure I got the bottom. Rims are always the areas that I kind of sometimes overlook, and so I'm just trying to make sure I get that space too. Gotta check it from different viewpoints. Okay, so I think that's good. A little bit streaky up here, so just gonna get the middle. But when I'm painting it, see, it's already dry down here, even though I did some touch-ups. You can tell it's dried when it starts looking like glossy. The metallic paint with Modern Masters has a sort of it can be a matte sheen and also like a satin sheen. So it's not like, it's not blingy, it's not super shiny. It has a like nice satin or matte finish to it. And when it dries, you'll see that the color starts to get a little bit lighter, but also the glossiness goes away. And then when you look at it, it'll look completely even, and that's when you know it's completely dry. If it still looks slick, then it's still wet, so leave it alone. But as it dries, the finish gets smooth and not glossy anymore. So that's how you tell, besides touching it, I mean. And sometimes you don't want to touch it because you'll get fingerprints, so you just want to eyeball it and just make sure it's okay to put another layer on. Oh, sorry, I just saw there's a spot up here. So you can see, like, I have to touch up some of the areas where I just didn't put enough paint layers to fully cover it. And I noticed it as I was standing up or sitting down and looking at it from different angles. I want to make sure it looks even completely, no matter what angle you're looking at it under or lighting. But it really doesn't take that long, so just a little bit of effort, but okay, so that is good. Go grab the brass paint.